Yeah, I think Lee
Leigh,
Briers was approached and said no, thank you. Um, Someone
we're
who wants to.
contractually obliged to link Brian McDermott to any spare coaching job.
I think the point here is no one who's already got a track record of of being a head coach in Super League will want to take this job because they won't be a head coach in Super League next year if they take this job. So it's going to have to be someone who's not been a head coach in Super League before, which doesn't necessarily give them much of a better position than what they were in, but they certainly can't change all of their squad. So something, I suppose they had to change something just to get a different feel about the place. And in 10 weeks' time, they might change again.
And if you were an established championship coach, why would you give up what you've got? So if you were a
It
second
depends what sort of
championship,
club you're at, I suppose. Maybe a Simon Finnegan might think Leigh's a better option because there you might compete for Super League in the next few years, whereas the club he's at have kind of moved the other direction a little bit. I suppose there's people like that might think of it, but I get what you're saying.
yeah, I mean, yeah, you could possibly then throw in someone like Lee Greenwood, who would be a step up for, but would you give up what you've got?
Yeah. What do you think about what's next for Duffy? Because I think he could still do a job in, I could imagine him popping up somewhere like Rochdale or Oldham or even back at Leigh again in 18 months' time.
I could definitely see him taking a club in League One actually and taking it up and then establishing it in the Championship, because I think his sort of methods are effective in that sort of playing base and that sort of style. I think he's a very good League One to Championship coach.
Yeah, certainly, I agree. Yeah.
But I think somewhat. So I think probably someone like Rochdale, Oldham, etc.
And we're not suggesting that those clubs should be losing their coaches in any way, shape, or form. We're just sort of talking about the level where we see John Duffy at.
Yeah, and it's that sort of it's a more established and settled sort of club in that respect that want to go up to the next level. I mean, I suppose could you even see him back at Swinton?
Well, only if someone goes and gives Stuart Littler a job either as a Super League assistant or a higher up, because I don't think they would make a knee-jerk decision, even though they've lost all their games, to replace him, because they know that what can they do that's much better, and they play. Anyone who watched them at the weekend will know that they play some fantastic rugby league football. They just don't always have the end product because of budgets and skill levels and that sort of thing. So yeah, but I could see him working alongside Littler again. That's for sure. And you could certainly imagine him being around one of the home nations international sides as well as an assistant coach in the World Cup coming up. I think he'd do a good job there, bringing in the back end of those squads, at, say, an Ireland or a Scotland again, or a Wales maybe. I think he's got good character for that kind of, because he's been in that position himself. Do you know what I mean? But good luck to him, whatever he figures out, and everything else seems to kind of be falling where we expected it to with the Leigh situation, unfortunately. Shall we move on to the Academy, where the RFL has extended the timelines within its proposals for Academy licensing from 2022, following what it describes as extensive consultation, what we describe as running scared from lawyers, effectively giving a lifeline to 3 clubs whose academy applications were rejected a little over a week ago. Probationary elite licences have now been awarded to Bradford Bulls, Castleford Tigers and Hull Kingston Rovers, the 3 clubs who currently hold academy licences and had not been awarded an elite academy licence under the initial proposals. These are going to be for a 2-year period, and the club's progress during that period will be kept under regular review according to the RFL. So, like it said, they are probationary. The RFL will also work with Leigh Centurions and Salford Red Devils, whose applications to launch an elite academy licence were also unsuccessful. They don't currently run academies. elite academies, but that work will be done to consolidate their development academies and help develop their surrounding community playing base, so that I guess hopefully that will give them an opportunity to have a more robust application next time around. A couple of people got in touch on this one. Do you want to give us the first one, Tim?
Yeah, Tom Andrews says, sense prevails and the RFL have egg on their face. Rimmer's position must be highly questioned now. The flip the week after the kids cry anyway bollocks. As a famous man once said, get him walking.
And David Hunter said, now I know what this is, I can comment further. In Australia, every club has these academies and high performance centres. Difference is they pay for them themselves. Not sure why clubs don't just do that. It's not quite as simple as that, I don't think. But he says, oh, because they have no money. Oh, well, yeah, it's not. Instead of complaining who has these centres, may be thankful that the government is investing at all. Surely the best way to do it, though, is via regions, not clubs. So I don't know if David does quite know what this is, and I mean that in the nicest way, because these academies are more like your finishing schools, they're not the first part of the pathway into the professional game, which would be your scholarships that the players at sort of 15, 16, 17 are involved in. Then this is your later age 17s, 18s, 19-year-olds who are playing in the academy leagues. So I think the players that are basically almost ready for first team action. So maybe there's a distinction to draw there. But what do you reckon, Tim?
So I think David sort of touched on it there. I think actually what the RFL could have done is divorce it from the clubs properly and actually have development as a separate activity from the club's activity, because there's always going to be a conflict there between the club's needs on a short-term basis and actually the long-term development of players in general.
Do you think we can do that at this age group? I think that's the...
Well, that's the thing. I think you'd have to do a lot more, and you'd have to be much more radical. You'd have to go down, the almost an area academy route. And I think the big failure from the RFL, and particularly from Mr. Rimmer as a change, is communication. They're just not clearly communicated or articulated, A, what they're trying to achieve, B, what the constraints are, because I think there are, reading between there's some financial constraints that we can only afford so many, because you've got to have the standards and things like anti-doping officials and education that goes with it, that comes centrally from the RFL, the referees, touch judges, all that always got to be paid for from some, and the administration of the league and all that kind of stuff that's got to be paid for from somewhere. I think there is a constraint that we can only afford so many. I think a lot of this is done by the fact that they happen to choose one of the clubs who had a chairman who's a highly successful lawyer. Therefore, the wording, as soon as the letter hit the doormat, the things got expedited quite quickly.
And one who's a highly successful power player in the darkened corridors, that he darkens himself with his presence.
Yes, who no doubt will have the right phone numbers, etc., etc. And so I think there's a little bit of that. I just think there's a problem there. Clearly, they've not articulated what it is, and it's just going to come back round at another point. I think, as you said last week, the car crash of an interview of kids cry anyway just wasn't the point and just missed the goal spectacularly. And he should have been more naked and articulated what the constraints are and present the opportunity cost. Does that mean, we run a division, we run 3 teams in an academy, or we have to cut off the funding for 5 teams in League One, for example? Do you have to make those choices very clear, or is it and I think this also links in to the charging structure that's coming in by semi-stealth for the amateur game, and all this thing that's coming on at the moment, which is going to get quite nasty, I think, in the next year or to 18 months, is the RFL are trying to introduce a membership levy to fund a black hole, and it's not because of the way the sport has been traditionally. It's not been presented very well. It's been presented very much through the back door and by people knowing things, and it's been mismanaged from a sort of directorate down.
And again, it's been sold as other sports do it, so just do it, rather than like this is how we're going to use this money. This is how we're going to make sure your kids are playing in better environments for better,
this is what this
better
costs.
coaching with better structures.
This is what you get for that. Yeah. This is what this costs. This is what you get for that. The only way we can do that is by this. If and present the options. It's if we did a no membership levy, it means we can't afford anyone to run the game. It's all got to be done by volunteers, and standards are predicted to drop by 20%, for example, or safeguarding might have to be cut, for example, and therefore that increases safety problems. And it's just being very or that means we can only train 400 coaches a year or something, being very clear about that.
Yeah, it means that the refereeing courses will have to be much higher fees, then we won't get any referees. There's,
or you pay for it for another way. So the match fee for a referee triples because half has got to go to the RFL.
Yeah.
It's not just the expenses and the petrol money for the referee. It's got to fund something else. There's opportunity costs in there. There's ways of presenting it and being quite clear that would get people on board. If you make the choice quite stark, you'll suddenly find people choose the right option. You present it as a gold, silver, and bronze wash, and watch everybody choose the middle option.
Well, the levy has been talked about almost in the same way as the kids cry anyway sort of kind of thing. Do you think, as Tom kind of hinted at there, do you think Ralph Rimmer's position becomes untenable? Ralph was, flying high early on last year into the pandemic when he was the first major sports governing body to receive government assistance, even though it was through the virtue of loans rather than grants. Do you think in the 12 months that we've moved on since then to now, Ralph Rimmer's position has become even more questioned than it anyway always is? And
well, I mean, I said at the time, it was never an inspiring appointment. It was never someone who you thought could galvanise and unite the game behind him. I wonder if we might see something after the World Cup. If, for example, I mean, the ideal scenario would be Super League and the RFL come back together to an extent, with perhaps a beefed up general manager of Super League, a new CEO who can unite people properly, and we've seen we've got a very talented administrator in the sport currently running the World Cup.
Yeah.
So we should be doing everything we can to keep that talent in the sport. That should be a strategic priority for the game. It probably almost definitely won't happen. But that should be the sort of thinking that should be coming from the directors of the RFL to say, look, there's clearly talent there. What do we do to keep it? Ralph Rimmer has shown that he's a very good manager lots of times. What he hasn't shown that he's a leader and someone who's ever going to unite and not piss as many people off, if not more, than he does. He satisfies every time he opens his mouth or does any sort of action. I mean, every time you see him on TV, something's going to come out that's going to sound ridiculous.
Or someone's going to be able to easily twist something into something else without much effort to then, sort of make the message get lost, basically. And that's what happens across our sport in this country almost all the time, which is unfortunate. But he's the figurehead of that, and there has to be consequences at some point, surely. And I don't understand why people within society now, but rugby league as well, don't seem to want to take personal accountability for that sort of thing, especially in the position that he's in, where he's not appointed to a company that he's run and set up, and he's not putting his money in as much as he's put loads of his time and effort in. He's been rewarded for that with